everyone. Sorry about the delay and technical errors. I still can't see myself or the screen or anything, but hopefully you can see the screen. So it is the last Friday today of Ramadan, so it is quite a special time, and it's an honor to be giving this talk today. So we're going to talk about four women that are mentioned in the Quran in Surah Tahrim, which is the 66th surah. And these verses show three different categories of women, and they're quite interesting examples for us to reflect on and learn from. So if you could go to the second slide, Zahira.
Yep.
Okay. So the verse, this is the 10th verse, and it goes like this. It says, God sets forth an example for those who disbelieve, the wife of Noah and the wife of Lut. They were both under two of our righteous servants, but betrayed them, so they could avail them not against God. And it was said to them, enter the fire along those who enter. So if we're to think about these two women, basically what they did, we know about Prophet Noah, Prophet Lut, and their wives unfortunately didn't accept them as prophets. They didn't accept their message. And, even though they were married to them, they were in that circle of, righteousness. But the message didn't get through to them. And that's what it means by betraying them. So they betrayed that message. And it says that these two, so they could avail them not against God. And if you look at the Arabic, it says, shay'a, they couldn't avail them at all, even a little bit against God. And what this means is that even though they were married to prophets, this could not save them, and the prophets won't be able to, benefit them on the day of judgment. And it was said to them that they are the dwellers of the fire. And I think this is a very powerful lesson for us to learn from, which is that, we all bear our own burden. Everyone is responsible for themselves. And there are so many verses in the Quran that point to that. For example, there's this from Surah Abasa, which are quite like striking verses. And it says, that day when one will flee from his own brother and from his mother and his father and his wife and his children, everyone that day will have enough concern of their own. So this is talking about the time where, people will be waiting for their judgment, and everyone will it will be chaos, and everyone just running away from everyone else and being like, don't, I can't give you any of my deeds, or I can't save you, just leave me alone. Everyone will have enough concern of their own. Um, and then there's, if you could go to the next slide, Zahira. There's also this verse in the Quran, whoever is guided, it is only for their own good, and whoever goes astray does so to his own detriment, and no soul shall bear the burden of another. So again, lots of reminders that even if you're surrounded by righteous people, that doesn't really give you anything unless that it comes from within you. Not even being married to the prophets themselves, like they literally couldn't get any better, but still. So next slide. So this now, the verse moves to something else. So here we had an example of two women married to the best and yet dwellers of the fire. Now we have an example of a woman who was married to the absolute worst, and yet she was one of the greatest women ever. And we're talking about Asiya, who was the wife of Pharaoh and of Egypt, and he was basically a tyrant king. He was oppressive, he was abusive, he was a murderer, he was slaying babies, he was getting women raped, just absolutely the worst of humanity. And he would consider himself basically a god. and he would not tolerate that people worship someone other than him. And so Asiya, we know her story and how, Moses, when he was a baby and his mother put him in the box, and he basically, yeah, floated across the river, ended up with um, Asiya, who was there with her maids at the Nile, and then she opens up the box and finds Moses in it, and she instantly is just so she just feels this connection with the baby, and she wants to adopt him. And then she goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh here is killing all the babies, but God had a plan, and he wanted to save Moses. And so Asiya then took Moses under her care, and as an adoptive mother, and basically Moses got raised in the palace of Pharaoh. And then if you look at Asiya, she was basically, married to one of the most powerful men, the richest. She had, palaces and maids, and she knew a life of luxury. And yet, when Moses then became a prophet and, was preaching the message, Asiya was one of the first ones to accept, even though she knew that this wouldn't mean good news for her, because Pharaoh obviously would not tolerate that. And at first, she sort of secretly practiced, and it wasn't made known to Pharaoh that she's accepted monotheism. But afterwards, Pharaoh, this kind of stuff kind of gets leaked out, and Pharaoh asked his chiefs, and he was like, "Tell me about this woman, Asiya. Has she now believed in his message?" And then he realized that, yeah, she had. And so Pharaoh goes and confronts Asiya and asks her about this. And Asiya says, "Yeah, I have disbelieved in you, Pharaoh, and I do not care." She literally said that, "Wala ubali, I don't care. And I've believed in my Lord and your Lord and the Lord of Musa." And so, as one can imagine, Pharaoh goes absolutely berserk, and he wants to force her to disbelieve. And so he basically plans to get her tortured. And every single day he sends his men to torture her out in the heat, and they drive, pegs through her, and just horrible, horrible torture. And then every day she still says, "Yes, I've disbelieved in you, and I don't care, and I've believed in my Lord and your Lord and the Lord of Moses." And so when this goes on for a while, Pharaoh just realizes that, okay, that she's not going to disbelieve. And so he basically orders his men to take her to a cliff and basically throw a boulder from the cliff onto her, so that she gets smashed. It's just awful. And when this is happening, she makes this beautiful, beautiful dua, which is, I feel like everyone should memorize this. It's just beautiful. It said, "Rabb ibni li indaka baytan fil jannah." My Rabb, my Lord, make for me indak, near you, baytan, a house in the garden, fil jannah. um, and if you focus on like the wording and just the word order, it's so beautiful. So she says, "Build for me, near you." Near you is actually before she even mentions what she wants, like before she mentions a house or in Jannah. So for her, like the main priority is that this house needs to be with uh near God and close to him. And then she says beta, which is a house. And she could have said palace or a castle or something in Jannah, but because she's living in a palace and she's used to that luxury. But she says house, just build for me a house. and it, showing that a house in Jannah is so much better than even the biggest palaces of this world. And also the fact that, she chose the location of her house before, she even chose what she wanted. And then the next line is وَنَجِّنِي مِنْ فِرْعَوْنَ وَعَمَلِهِ وَنَجِّنِي مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ, and save me from Pharaoh and his works, his evil works, and save me from the wrongdoing people. And so this is happening while she's being tortured, and what God does is he shows her a vision of this house in Jannah. And when she sees it, she laughs. And then Pharaoh is standing there watching, and he says to his men, like, what kind of madness is this woman? Look at her, we're torturing her and she's laughing. And the second part of this dua was also accepted right there. And before that boulder could actually fall on her, God took her soul back. So God saved her from being crushed by the boulder, and it hit basically a lifeless body. And so it's quite an incredible story, and there are so many lessons that we can derive from this, lessons of perseverance and just certainty in God, that, he will save her, and just the power of the dua, and just the close relationship she had with God, despite being married to this, tyrant. And then the patience and the fact that she literally gave up, everything for God. I mean, who would, she knew what was going to happen. She knew she was married to this person who murders people at the snap of a finger. He doesn't care about that. um and just her, the luxuries and the comfort of this life, but she gave up all of that for God. And there is a lesson in that if you give up something for God, then you always, it always gets replaced with something much much better. And in this case, you can see that, she gained just the best house in Jannah. um Next slide please, Zahira. So the third now verse, so we had this example of the, worst of women married to the best of men. Then we had this amazing woman who was married to the tyrant, and now we have a woman who was a virgin and chaste, and we know her as the greatest woman to have lived, and that's Maryam. And the verse, again, the way the verse says وَمَرْيَمَ ابْنَةَ عِمْرَانَ, instead of saying Mary, the mother of Jesus, it says, and Mary, the daughter of Imran, meaning, even without her association with being the mother of Jesus, even without that link, she was still so great and so amazing in and of herself, and who she was. And so the verse says, and Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, and we breathed into her from our spirit, and she testified to the words of her master and his scriptures, and was of the devoutly obedient. So Maryam, she has, I mean, we can talk about her for ages, but there are some key things I wanted to sort of highlight. One that I found really incredible was that she was literally blessed, since even before her birth, when her mother made a dua and said, oh God, whatever child you give me, I want to dedicate that to you, to your service. And she was expecting a son, and then when she delivered a daughter, she was like, oh, the daughter is not like the son. And but she said that, please still accept this child of mine in devotion to you. And so she wanted this child to basically, grow up in the temple, be surrounded by scholars, and read the scriptures, and become a learned person. And this usually, it was the men in the temples that were doing this. But in this case, this was probably the first case now of a woman who then grew up in that temple, in that surrounding. And if you could go to the next slide, Zahira. And so she then basically gave Miriam to the care of Prophet Zechariah, who built her a little private sanctuary in the temple so that she could still be there and, worship and have her own space, but that she was also, her chastity could be maintained, and she would have her own private space. And then in the Quran it says that God blessed her with a good upbringing. He oversaw her upbringing and made sure that it was the best. And so this child, and then, she grew up becoming a young woman and basically spending her whole day in remembrance of God and worship, and her whole life was basically dedicated to that. And this was, her being trained for the trial that is yet to come, in that, she's to give birth to Jesus, and that she will, be forsaken by her people, etc. And so this bit I really love, in that one time Zechariah came to her, and no, it says every time Zechariah came into the sanctuary, he found her with provision. And this provision, it was like fruits and stuff from out of the season fruits, and he was always very surprised as to where she was getting them from. There weren't freezers or refrigerators that, she'd have these fruits. And so he said, oh Mary, where is this coming from? And then she answers to him, she says, this is from God, this is from Allah. Verily, God provides for whom he wills without measure. And it's just, again, such a beautiful verse, and a beautiful thing that she said, where, God is not limited. God doesn't have, restrictions. He provides for whom he wills without any measure. And this um, touched Zechariah so deeply, and he realized that, he wanted something from God very badly, and he wanted a son, or he didn't have any offspring. They were, both him and his wife were really old at that point, and he had almost lost hope. And so then he realized that, oh, this is a clear lesson. She's getting those fruits which seemed quite improbable. And then he then made a prayer for a child, and it was accepted right there. And then he got the glad tidings of Yahya, who also became a prophet. And so, here we learn, again, reliance on God, and just the importance of uh, devotion, and also the fact that her modesty and her chastity is specifically mentioned. When God says, if you could go back to the last slide, Zahira, slide number 5. So when God says, you know, um, who guarded her chastity, is literally how he's describing her, Mary, the one who guarded her chastity. And then what made her so special and so amazing, simple things that we can learn from. She testified to the words of her master and his scriptures, so she believed so deeply, and she was of the devout and the obedient, the qanitin. And that basically, earned her this special status. So it's something that, it's not something absolutely improbable that we can't learn from, or only she could do, but these are things that we can do ourselves. And so, try and emulate that, and try to reach you know uh, higher and higher levels of devotion and ranks in God's sight. So just sort of in wrapping it up again, it's so cool that God has literally, given us examples of women, again, married to the best, a woman married to the worst, a woman who is chaste and not married. And so we have these, it also sort of putting these three examples together also kind of gives us the lesson in that, our society can sometimes judge us based on marital status or luxuries of this world and what you have, and kind of judge you through that picture of, oh, someone's married to that, or someone's married to that, or someone's not married. And yet all of these things don't matter to God. What matters is this internal thing, and who you are as a person, regardless of marital status or financial status. All of these outside appearances doesn't matter. And again, it's it doesn't determine your ranks in God's eyes. So that's some lessons that I thought were worth mentioning. But I would also love to hear from you all on, just thinking about their lives. There are so many things that I haven't mentioned from their lives, and it would be so nice if some of you could also share what you find inspiring and what lessons we can derive from that, because that's what the verses say, that these are, God has set forth an example for the believers. So what are the examples in that? That's something that we can all reflect on. So thank you, Jazakallah khair, and please do mention other stuff if you want.
Jazakallah khair for that. I found that really interesting, and the example of the believers are especially inspiring stories for me. With Maryam alayhi salam, my favorite sort of thing is when she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam, and everybody was wondering how obviously she's chaste, and wondering how that she had it, and then she kept silent, obviously, because God commanded her to. And then when Isa started speaking and vouched for her, I just found it a really nice and cute story. But yeah, anyone else that has any contributions or questions, please feel free to add. It will be nice to open the discussion, as Hira said.
What you mentioned also reminds me of when she is literally in the pains of labor and giving birth, and she's finding it extremely difficult, and God then says to her, do not grieve, and shake this palm tree, and you'll have fresh ripe dates fall on top of you. And anyone who knows a palm tree knows that you can't really shake from the bottom. You can't shake it, and you can't really get dates to fall just like that. But there's important lessons in that. That she did what she was told. She trusted again God and relied on him. And the other thing that God still wants us to put in the effort and do the action, and then God multiplies the result. So the action's with us, but the outcome is with God, and the result comes from God. And then she shook the tree, and yes, the dates fell from there. It's also a really good lesson.
I'm not sure if anybody has any more. Like, you can even just type them into the chat if you want to.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody's raised their hand. Let me ask them to unmute. Hisham.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair for the talk, Sister Hira. What I'd like to say is something regarding the story of Musa Ali Salam and his mother, because you touched upon it briefly, but I just thought it's good to go back. So the mother of Musa Ali Salam, when she's confronted with the choice of leaving her kid, right? Because Pharaoh is executing all male children, and the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to leave the baby on the Nile River, one of the mightiest rivers out there, and to have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does that. She does that. And what's the next point after that? Asya takes Musa Ali Salam into her care, and then they're looking for a woman to breastfeed Musa, and they can't manage to find a single woman in the city until they go back to his mother. And what's the condition of the mother of Musa Ali Salam? Her only condition is that you bring him to me every single day. And that cycle finishes, right? And I just, when I was reading about this, it just struck me because the amount of tawakkul and reliance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you need to leave your kid on the Nile River, it's just insane. And then
in a
subhanallah,
box, no one's tested it for water safety or anything, you know.
exactly subhanallah. And then after all that, she gets her own son back, and she can breastfeed him every day, and it just, it's mind-blowing if you come to think of it. And I just thought it was good to go back over it.
Exactly. And then the timing as well, God's timing, and that when he reaches that bit of the Nile, Asiya is there at that spot on that day, that as well, to actually receive him.
Yeah, subhanallah.
Okay, if we have no more questions, then we'll probably finish it there. But Hira, if you have any last comments or any du'as that you want to pray, yeah, feel free to do so before we finish.
Nothing, just a reminder that it's Friday, and so, you know, this time before Maghrib is a blessed time, and especially for prayers, it's a time of acceptance. And, you know, that's every Friday, but being a Friday in Ramadan, and we're fasting, and tonight is, well, not an odd night tonight, but, you know, being the last Friday as well. So it's quite special. So inshallah, make the most of it, and may Allah accept all our prayers and our fasts, and allow us to live many more years to see many more Ramadans, inshallah.
Yeah, Ameen. And Jazakallah for your talk.
وإياكم.
And the reminder as well. Yeah. Okay, I'll finish the meeting here then. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.